ESPN 94.1 FM and AM 930 present The Drive.
It is Tuesday, February 17th. Your drive begins now on ESPN 94.1 and AM 930. I'm your host, Paul Swann. Our text line this hour brought to you by Clark's Pump and Shop at 304-396-TALK. That is 304-396-8255. Coming up today on the program, we're going to be speaking with Vice President and Director of Athletics, Gerald Harrison. We'll do that here in about the next 10 minutes. A very heartfelt but necessary decision coming down today from the Board of Governors about the affordability and the continuance of the Marshall Swim and Dive program. It was a unanimous vote to discontinue swim and dive. If you didn't get a chance to listen to the meeting earlier today, I think that the athletic director really made a strong case for the reason why. It doesn't make it popular. It doesn't make it easier. And I'm sure there will be some people that maybe just don't care what the reasoning was. They just lost swim and dive. But I think he made a strong case, very transparent today after the news broke last week that the swim and dive program would be shuttered after the season. Marshall is also going to add women's stunt. And we'll hopefully know more about that as the weeks progress, but very difficult today. If you heard Brad Smith, very passionate as well. I mean, he heard from a lot of Herd fans. There was a petition going around. A lot of people have contacted him directly about the program, and I think they laid the case out as to why they came to this decision. But for some clarity, Gerald's going to join us in the next few minutes. We'll talk to him about the reason why, the process, of course, also where the funds will go. There's going to be a huge savings if you look at the numbers provided by Marshall today. They're anticipating saving about $2.6 million over the first 3 years. This program has a low startup cost. It was about $819,000 annually budgeted for swimming, and the facilities are aging. And it would mean capital improvement to keep it at a Division I level, to maintain it to the standard needed to be a Division I programming, give the team a competitive chance to be a part of championships. There's so many things we can get into. And, of course, we'll get your reaction, 304-396-TALK, 304-396-8255. That is our number to be a part of today's show here on ESPN 94.1 and AM 930. Also on X at Paul Swann. I got a couple of people already asking a few things as far as why replace the sport with stunt. And I think stunt is going to give you more opportunity because you can have up to 65 roster spots. Right now, Marshall isn't in a terrible spot when it comes to Title IX, but this would help improve, and obviously you're subtracting and then adding. And so you can make up the difference with the stunt program. It's going to save the program a lot more money. The infrastructure is already there. The big one is going to be the facilities. The cost to maintain the facilities, let alone upgrade the facilities, and we're talking about facilities that are almost as old as, me. I'm 54. The facilities, I think, 45 in that range, give or take. And so these are a lot. I mean, we're talking not about laying some new flooring down, painting what they did, for the practice facility. We're not talking about superficial improvements that really can help your program. We're talking about major infrastructure here and the affordability. And this is also a sport that's no longer sponsored by the Sun Belt. The travel comes into play. The details are still vague as far as what the stunt team's going to look like, how this will work out. It's relatively new sport to me as well. So I'm going to be asking questions. You can ask questions as well. And again, we'll take those. You can text them in, or you can find me on X at Paul Swann. Also, we are on Facebook. The show page is The Drive with Paul Swann. And so any questions you have, we'll take those. Had someone ask me to ask about the impact on the 4 local high school swim teams that practice and host their meets on campus. And it was my impression from listening earlier today that the pool is going to remain open for the community and the area high school teams. It's just not a Division I standard anymore. The maintenance of the facility compared to the upgrading of the facility or the bringing the facility up to standard is big question here. How do you pull that off? And then how do you maintain the sport, which seems to be a little bit more costly as years have gone by, compared to a relatively new sport in stunt. You get more roster spots on the women's side. It's also something that you can maintain easily because the facilities are already there. You're not building a brand new infrastructure to support this sport. So those are probably some of the reasons that went into the overall recommendation that, to be a little bit more of a healthy athletic department, we're going to have to take away here, unfortunately, and we're going to have to reprioritize our resources. At the same time, we do need to maintain our commitment to Title IX, provide opportunities. The best sport to do that will be stunt. And so, hard decision today from the Board of Governors. I appreciate the case that was made by Brad Smith and by Athletic Director Gerald Harrison. It was well laid out. I think the only thing that maybe bugs probably a few of you was the fact that when the news broke, Marshall releases a statement, and there wasn't any detail to that statement. A few days later, we find out why the timing of everything happened. It was the coach's decision to make the announcement to the team sooner than later because that way the team didn't find out secondhand. Also, transfer portal considerations, giving these student athletes a lot more flexibility as far as pursuing other opportunities for those that maybe want to stay on campus and actually continue their education at Marshall University. They're going to be taken care of. So there's a lot that went into the decision today. And here in the next few minutes, we're going to hear from Marshall Athletic Director Gerald Harrison. So he's going to be joining us in a few minutes. So I'm going to go ahead and clear the deck now. Stick around. We'll get your questions. Text in 304-396-TALK, 304-396-8255 on this edition of The Drive on ESPN 94.1 and AM 930.
Hi, this is Dave Wilson, host of Metro News Talk Line, and you're listening to The Drive with Paul Swann on ESPN 94.1 and AM 930.
Thank you, Dave. Don't forget, coming up tomorrow, 10:06, it is Metro News Talk Line right here on ESPN 94.1 and AM 930. Welcome back. Paul Swann, your host for today's edition of The Drive here on ESPN 94.1 and AM 930. Been a tough day at Marshall University. Earlier this afternoon, the Marshall Board of Governors made the announcement that the women's swimming and diving program would be discontinued after the conclusion of this season, and also a new program would be added at Marshall University STUNT. To give us a little bit more detail about the process and the decision is Vice President and Director of Athletics, Gerald Harrison, who joins us today. Gerald, thanks for spending some time with us. I know this has been a very tough few days as far as you never want to cut a program, and there are always student athletes that are involved. These are people, and it's very hard to tell them that they no longer have a sport to compete at Marshall University.
Yeah, thank you for having me on. I appreciate it. It is a tough day. Anytime that you have to make a decision that impacts the lives of 28 outstanding student athletes and coaches, you get it doesn't feel good. I've heard from so many people that are supportive of our young women, and I personally received emails, responded to emails. All were sincere, all were passionate, some emotional. But it's tough when you have to do it. But at some point, you got to be measured and analytical and really start thinking about the future of Marshall athletics as a whole.
The decision was made after the review process, could you describe what that process, was like, what you were looking for? And is this the only recommendation that might come from that process, or will we see more?
Great question. So once I got hired in August, once we got our staff settled and really got my deputy director, Naisha Campbell, on board, we knew what we were looking for and started looking at and evaluating all of our programs. Everybody from football on to even our sponsorship from cheer and dance is one of our areas that we oversee. And we looked at everything closely, and then we started thinking about all of the things that are out there that we are dealing with. Right now, we're working on there's some financial challenges that we're taking on, that we took on when we got here. But beyond that, we got to look at we had a external Title IX summary done in October of 2025, and started looking at it in ways that we can actually come closer there and improve our situation there. And so then we looked at sustainability and how can we compete, not just get out and participate, but compete for championships and put our student athletes in the best chance to succeed and make sure they have the best student athlete experience possible. That's something that's very important to me. And so that's how the process started. It took a while to go through. We wanted to live it a little bit and see it in reaction. We talked to coaches in my one-on-one meetings. We talked to student athletes via our student athlete advisory committee. And no, we didn't go in and say, hey, what can we do to change or drop the change? We're just like, what would make this better? How does this work for you? What is your experience? We looked at that stuff and we kind of put it in order and looked for a way to solve all the problems, or to start solving all the problems. The first step on a long journey. And then we made a decision that it was the best decision was to make a recommendation to discontinue swimming and dive. To answer your question about other sports, we feel like we're in a good position. We feel like we're answering the question. We're going to enhance and really maximize what we do in tennis and women's tennis. We're really going to strengthen what we do in women's track to provide even more participation opportunities and STUNT, and on top of what we're doing with the STUNT situation. And then that's step 1 and 2, and then we'll create a plan for the next 5 years as well.
Our guest is Vice President, Director of Athletics, Gerald Harrison. Is it fair to say, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but is it fair to say that there was a chance that you could have found a way to save swim and dive? You didn't just decide yesterday, hey, we're going to get rid of this, we're done. What was the process like trying to figure out how do we make this work before you ultimately came at that decision that we can't do it the right way?
Well, I think the first thing we looked at, that when you start making these type of decisions, is the impact. Somebody, some group, someone was probably going to be disappointed, was going to be in the situation that we're in. We could not reasonably sustain and do the things that we needed to do to grow our athletics department and keep us moving forward if we didn't make some changes in our operations and how we go. When you look at swimming and diving, it's a large sport. It has a large budget relatively for Olympic sports, and also our facilities are not where they need to be, and not anywhere that I wanted to be when I got here in August. And we cannot let that continue. But there's so much between the operating budget and the capital campaign that we would have to launch to get our facilities up to standard, it was going to be a challenge. But yeah, no, we explored other sports, other competition, other combinations of things. We studied fundraising, all those things were done. This wasn't just, hey, this is the easiest route. It is the route that made the most sense in combination for Marshall and Marshall athletics going forward.
Our guest is Vice President and Director of Athletics, Gerald Harrison. So with the discontinuation of the program, the announcement got leaked, or it came out before you were ready to make that announcement publicly. Of course, the Board of Governors meeting needed to happen. I guess this is your opportunity to maybe explain how the process began for informing the coaches, informing the student athletes, because you had a lot of flack on social media and other places that, hey, this is right before a championship. This isn't fair to those student athletes. And, after listening to you today, you went out of your way to make sure that they didn't find out about it by a social media post or somebody trying to break news.
Right, and that was the main idea of going as fast as we did was just that. It wasn't about them being out of town. It wasn't anything secretive or anything like that. We wanted to make sure that they heard it from us. I know a lot of them don't want to ever hear my voice again, but I had to tell them myself, and I had to tell them in their face as soon as possible. For we can't control leaks and the narratives that get out. So the first step after we met with President Smith to talk about it and tell him what our recommendation was going to be. Once we decided that we were going to move forward, I made a decision to inform Coach Walsh, because I knew, obviously, when you get around, more people know things are going on, and it increases the chance of there being a leak. And in fairness, I found Marshall is pretty good with information getting out. I read about my whole interview process the day I got back and what everybody else who was in the search did while I was in there, because somebody put something on social media. So I didn't want that to happen to our student athletes. So I told Coach Walsh, and in the conversation with him, our original plan was to do all this immediately following the championship. They would get back on Sunday. We had these conversations on that Monday. Coach Walsh was very adamant that he wanted to let the student athletes know right away, and made the decision that he set the meeting that we were going to do it on Thursday afternoon. I informed President Smith that he wanted to do it that way. We felt like the coach knows his student athletes better than anybody, and so he wanted us to do it, and that's when we informed the team, and that's the story behind that. Now, the process of even doing it after the championship, there's no good time to give bad news. I mean, that's the reality of it. But the reason we wanted to do it very soon, as soon as possible, is to give our student athletes the opportunity to explore and decide whether they want to join the transfer portal, which opens on March 11th, which gives them a chance to get with their academic advisors and all those folks involved to make sure that everything is ready if they chose to transfer. And as I said, as of today, this morning when we did the board meeting, there's 17 of them already in the portal. And so those 17 individuals can get their stuff together for preparing to transfer, look at schools that may have slots open, but also it gives coaches on the other side to know that these quality student athletes that are right now in Marshall are here and that they are available to be recruited. So if they start looking for slots, they may hold one or think about it. So we want to give them as much runway as possible to find a place that they feel like they belong and they want to go, and give them the best chance to be successful in their future, not just athletically, but academically as well.
Our guest is Vice President, Director of Athletics, Gerald Harrison. There is one curiosity, because I don't know your timetable. There was recently an addition to this swim and dive program. You hire a new diving coach, and that release comes out late January. How soon or how long ago was that recommendation made, or when did you come to that conclusion that this is the recommendation we have to go with? Because I kind of feel, and maybe I'm wrong, that you were trying to hold out as long as you could to see if you can make this work before you came to that conclusion. Is that fair?
That is very fair. We didn't want to say anything to anybody or stop any process that was going on until we knew that we have met, that we are at the end of the road. This is the recommendation that I'm going to take to the president's office, and then he and I would take to the board. We went through it. We met. We like I said, we tinkered with a lot of things, but it would have been unfair because our young people have to finish the season. So we our coach made a decision to make a change in his assistant coach from a diving perspective before the holidays. Before Christmas holidays. And so our student athletes were without a coach and still competing, still preparing for competition. Ian's strength is swimming, is actually the techniques and everything involved with swimming. to his own admittance, he's not a diving coach. So for our student athletes to have a best chance to succeed and to compete, we need to get somebody in who was a diving specific coach. In that process, it took a little bit longer than probably any of us expected to find somebody that fit. And then we went through it. He was hired before the final decision was made, and we weren't going to hold it up until, hey, let's go all year. Let's go the rest of the spring semester without a diving coach. Then we got criticized for that because you don't care enough to find us a coach. So we wanted to make sure that he can recruit, he can do all the things he needed to do until we turned over that last stone and realized there was nothing there. And so we were going to have to make a tough decision.
Our guest is Gerald Harrison. He is the Vice President and Director of Athletics at Marshall University. The decision coming down today from the Board of Governors to discontinue swim and dive and add stunt. I want to ask you about stunt in just a moment, but probably the biggest thing, the takeaway from, I think, what we're seeing here today is there's a lot of community support. And some of that comes from that facility is also used for other things, not just Marshall. There are other high school programs that are involved. Did that factor into the decision as far as how to make all this work? And it's my understanding, correct, that that's still going to happen. The high schools that use that facility now, they're still going to be able to use that. Is that correct?
That is 100% correct. President Smith mentioned that in his remarks today during the board meeting. The pool will still be open and be used for the tri-state area, for our club team that's here at Marshall, for academic use. We have people who take classes in there, and also for the community. We have good friends in the family that we've met whose daughters are on their high school swim team, and so the pool will still be there and operational for that. What I would remind people is that the pool itself is operated by campus recreation. It's not in the operations. It's not an athletics department managed facility. Our team competes there, but it's not a Marshall Athletics facility. It's not a budget line item. However, everything needed for Division I competition, everything from the locker rooms to the dry room to the way the facility looks, we needed different technologies and all that kind of stuff. That is the responsibility of intercollegiate athletics, and those are the things that were running up a substantial tab, and that we had to start looking at when we start looking at our future.
Speaking of the future, Brad Smith outlined some of the costs and the savings that the athletic department would see with the decision to discontinue swim and dive, and of course to add stunt as well with the opportunities there. How will those savings be realized in other aspects of the athletic department? I know you alluded to earlier improving tennis and softball. Where will that savings go, maybe, or what maybe is the plan at this point after this decision today when it comes to maybe that revenue?
Right. So the money not spent, we'll look at, like I touched on, it will have a definite impact on several of our women's sports, like women's track, golf, tennis, so on. There will be an impact felt there. But beyond that, we are trying to, prior to my arrival, Marshall Athletics has done a lot of different things and grown, whether it's the Shuey deck, whether it's the baseball field, there's so many different projects that have been going on. And we put a real strain on our athletics department. And what is required from us now is that we take a look at every dollar that we can either save or spend, and where it's going out, and try to how do we maximize that dollar. So it's a little change of philosophy to get us into a good space. Brad openly talks about in our board meetings about the goal of being 50-50, from being supported by the university administration, 50% of our budget, and the athletics department generating revenue of 50% of the revenue to get us to a 50-50 split. That is a goal of ours. Right now, we're not quite there. We're at 54.5 and 45 or something like that. I'm very close, but we're not where we need to be. And so we're trying to continue to look for ways to get closer to that 50-50 benchmark while not impacting the student-athlete experience. And we're doing more and more things in that area. And while we also can build our infrastructure, whether it's in the Joan or the CAM or in any of the Klein, any of our facilities, how we can improve the house that we're in. So when you start talking about savings, all those areas can be impacted when you start talking about $819,000 coming back into the budget.
Our guest is the Vice President and Director of Athletics at Marshall University, Gerald Harrison. Of course, the other news today is STUNT is going to be added to the athletic department, and that's a growing sport. There are some that maybe are still not as familiar with it. So if you could you talk about why STUNT was attractive to you and Marshall University as a sport to add? Obviously, the numbers are going to help you with the potential for roster spots, but you've got the infrastructure. You've alluded to that. You've got the facility. So the startup costs are going to be minimal, it sounds like. How far along are you in the process? Do we have an idea yet, a timetable? Are you ahead of the schedule, or now we're just, now we're looking to start building out the program, hiring a coach?
Right. So great question. The actual start and everything, we had to wait for board approval. So we didn't jump ahead of the board. We have a theory of a timeline that we put together for starting our STUNT program, and now we get to start that and put it in place. And so what we're looking at is probably next year, over the next year or so, this year and the part of the next fiscal year, we'll work on making sure we got everything that we need. We'll go visit schools and STUNT competitions to make sure we know everything that we need to know and make sure we avoid any potholes that other schools may have had in startups. Then we'll hire a coach, and then the coach will have some time, hopefully a semester or two, to recruit, and then we'll be ready for spring competition. So that's kind of the path that we're going for. We have a cheerleading squad of 36, which is really a club or an organization. It's not a varsity sport. So we're hopeful that several members of that group will want to participate in NCAA Division I varsity sport, that will have aid, in a lot of areas to be available to them. So we hope a lot of those people will do that. We are actually going to send a small group over to Nashville, where there's going to be a pretty large STUNT championship competition, so they can talk with coaches and evaluate and see it. But right now, from an infrastructure standpoint, we know where we'll compete. We know that Ohio, Kentucky, and Pennsylvania are three of the largest areas and fastest growing areas for STUNT in the country. That's not just important for the athletics department to build this team out, but it's also important. That is also the metro areas for the university when it comes to enrollment management and continued growth. So the university's increased enrollment 7%. How do we keep this going? We feel like adding STUNT will also help get the Marshall brand out in some of these places and bring more people to our great campus here in Huntington. So we got a plan. We got a timetable to work it. And we're really just excited to bring that to this area and be the first school in West Virginia to actually have STUNT.
Would you also be the first school in the Sun Belt to have STUNT, or are there programs already established in the Sun Belt that maybe, because I'm not that familiar with it?
I think there's a few. I think there are not any defined right now as varsity sports. The NCAA championship status for STUNT just passed at the last NCAA convention, making it the 93rd NCAA championship. And so I think people are evaluating it and making a decision, but there's a lot of driving distance schools in the area that compete in this that will give us a good schedule. The Sun Belt is not looking at sponsoring it right now, but there are definitely conferences in the area that touch these areas that we talked about earlier, Ohio, Pennsylvania, and Kentucky, that we can jump in if we need to.
Our guest is Vice President, Director of Athletics, Marshall University, Gerald Harrison. Gerald, before I let you go, is there anything maybe you would like to add? I know today, very emotional. I could hear it in your voice as you were on the video stream earlier today. This is not fun. You're an athletic director that wants to make sure that you're doing everything right, and I understand that about you. If you're going to do something, do it right, and sometimes decisions like this need to be made. is there anything maybe you'd like to say or express that, if you have a moment?
Well, it's one of the things I'll be very candid about is I've loved every minute of my time here at Marshall. Win or lose, the people have been outstanding. The community has been great, welcoming to my family. But the last few days have been the hardest period of time that I've had professionally, with the exception of the unfortunately, we had to bury two student athletes at Austin that were killed in a car accident back to back, one year and the next year. And that was devastating to go visit with their parents. But next to that, when there's a loss of life, this has probably been the most challenging part of my professional career, to actually have to shutter a sport. And I think people don't understand. My daughter is a Division I women's athlete at Western Kentucky. My wife ran track in college at the Division I level, and then my youngest is on three teams in high school, and it's so I am an advocate for not just saying advocate for Title IX, but I'm an advocate for women having the opportunity to compete and be a part of this intercollegiate athletics family. And to have to stop that, to have to stop one of those teams is hard. To have to look into those student athletes' face and say that, hey, we're going to go in a different direction. It's hard. But no one becomes the director of athletics to sit in his chair and not knowing that you've got to make a tough decision, not knowing that there's going to be a hard moment. And this is one of those for me in the first 6 months of my time here at Marshall. But those outstanding student athletes are incredible. They've done everything that we've asked them to do. They represent their university well. It's not about them today and this one team, this one squad. It's about sustainability and strength as we go forward to continue building the most complete athletics department in the country, which is what our goal is here at Marshall.
Vice President, Director of Athletics, Gerald Harrison, as always, thank you for your time. I appreciate your transparency, your candor, and hopefully the next time we're able to speak, it's on better terms and a better day.
Absolutely. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Gerald Harrison, again, Vice President, Director of Athletics, Marshall University. Very trying day for him and the Board of Governors as the difficult decision to discontinue the swim and dive program. On the positive side, Marshall trying to provide opportunities, adding STUNT, and we'll learn more about that department and that program as the weeks and months progress. We're going to open things up to you now, 304-396-TALK, 304-396-8255. This is The Drive on ESPN 94.1 and AM 930.
Listening to The Drive with Paul Swann on ESPN 94.1 and AM 930.
We continue with this Tuesday, February 17th edition, Your Drive on ESPN 94.1 and AM 930. Our text line brought to you by Clark's Pump and Shop, 304-396-TALK, 304-396-8255. We're going to be open text the rest of the way as we just spoke with the Vice President, Director of Athletics, Marshall University, Gerald Harrison. The decision coming down earlier today that the swim and dive program would be discontinued after the conclusion of the season. Also, STUNT would be added at Marshall University. If you missed the interview, we'll have that posted later on our podcast, which is available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Also, you can head over to our website, wrvc.com. We post the audio there as well. We take all texts, so don't be afraid if you've got a differing opinion. If it's about me, it's about the athletic director, it's about anything, we do read them, and we take them now. 304-396-TALK, 304-396-8255. Texture says, Paul, today's action by the Board of Governors is an insult to female athletes and to Marshall supporters. Replacing swimming with stunts, a bogus, quote, sport apparently created for the purpose of providing a low-cost way to meet the requirements of Title IX. What I'm hearing is that Marshall clearly supports women's sports as long as they don't cost too much. We appreciate the text. I don't think I buy that Marshall was trying to minimize the contributions of the women's programs at Marshall University in a cash grab. I don't buy that. You look at the swimming facility, and it's aged. And Gerald made a great point. Marshall does not run that facility, so it doesn't impact the community. Now, Marshall uses the facilities, but for Marshall to be competitive at the Division I level and to maintain Division I status, the facilities were woefully inadequate. And so the decision was made. I concur with that as far as those facilities are concerned. They are woefully inadequate. Now, for high school usage in the community, I think that they're still viable and they're going to bring years and years of service to the area. But if you're investing that much money into the infrastructure, into the maintenance and the maintaining of that sport, what's your return on investment? And I hate using that word, but it's the only way I can describe it, because Brad Smith said this, and I found this interesting. Brad said, look, it's going to cost $16 million to endow swimming and diving because we got to run this every year. We could get the capital expenditure going and we could upgrade everything, but we still got to run this. And he said $16 million to endow swimming and diving, or Marshall for All, which would provide 800 students a debt-free education. And that's a big program. Now, I'm not saying that Marshall just decided to trade swimming and diving for Marshall for All. Some will say that. But he was bringing up a great point. In the structural deficit, if you listen to the Board of Governors meeting today, it's dropped from $28 million to $10 million. And Gerald brought this up. The split right now is about 55% subsidy from the university compared to 45% from the athletic department, and Brad wants that to be a 50-50 split to maintain stability and sustainability for not only the athletic department, but the university. Now, what this means is you're going to have to make some decisions. The decision was made that swimming and diving wasn't up to where it needed to be facility-wise, infrastructure-wise. And this isn't a reflection on those athletes and the coaching staff. This is more of a issue with, I think, today's college athletics. To be quite blunt, nobody wants to see a sport lost, and I feel for all the student athletes, with the transfer portal, they're going to find an opportunity, hopefully elsewhere, and they're going to continue their career. And for those that want to stay at Marshall University and continue their education, they're going to have that opportunity. Now, with STUNT comes in and it's becoming more popular. It's a variation of cheerleading. And to say that STUNT is bogus, I don't know enough about it yet to really tell you how competitive or how athletic it is. I don't know enough about it, but I'm going to learn. And I know that it will bring a lot of people to Marshall University. The student athletes that Marshall might be able to attract based off of STUNT could be more beneficial than you think. And there are, let's just say this, cheerleading and the variations are very, very popular in this region. And that's going to make a lot of people happy that STUNT's available as an opportunity. And it's going to be more competitive. This isn't Bring It On. I was trying to explain this to someone today. This isn't Bring It On where you've got cheerleading squads competing against each other and it's going to be showy. No, this is going to be more of a athletic competition than a showy competition, where that's the best way I can describe it. That competitive cheerleading dance academy culture, I don't think this is it. But I'm here to learn. I'm here to discover more about it and to hopefully be able to speak better to what STUNT is. But I know this. as disappointing as it is to see several student athletes leave Marshall University, Gerald did say that there's going to be improvements to the other offerings at Marshall University, including bringing more opportunity with STUNT, because you're going to be able, I think, basically to double those opportunities. And that means now a lot of people that are at Marshall right now, the cheerleading squad, you heard him say there could be, opportunity for them to transition over and be a part of this program. And there is aid available. There will be resources available to them. So I don't think female athletes are being insulted, but that's just my initial thought listening to the reasoning why the swimming and the diving programs at Marshall University are going to be shuttered. Now, you can definitely disagree with me at 304-396-TALK, 304-396-8255. You can also be part of the show today. You can follow me on X at Paul Swann, and you can message me there. And you can join us on our Facebook page. It's The Drive with Paul Swann, and we post links on various social media networks. You can follow the podcast. We've got several ways for you to be a part of the show. But I think he answered all the major questions, or at least the initial major questions today. The high school impact, that was something that came up from several people that messaged me privately, or at least not publicly on mentions. And so I think that this is going to turn into, at least in the short term, this is going to turn into an opportunity for Marshall to strengthen the other sports, to create opportunity for student athletes. And Marshall just didn't kick these athletes out. Marshall's going to provide support for these student athletes. These student athletes are going to find opportunity elsewhere. And they're already 17 in the transfer portal, so that means there could be an opportunity for them. The timetable that was presented basically lines up to, we were going to do this after the championships, but coach decided that it would be best to give them a little bit more of an opportunity to find a landing spot and have flexibility. At the same time, he did it personally. Then it breaks on social media, and that kind of throws the timetable off a little bit. If that timetable would have come down without the breaking of news, it might have went down a little bit different. And there still would be that outrage from a lot of people, a lot of supporters about this program. I don't want to see anyone lose their sport. I know wrestling is still talked about to this day at Marshall University from others that lament the fact that Marshall doesn't have a wrestling program anymore. And I completely get it. I mean, it's your sport. You're passionate about it. I've spoken with a couple of former athletes, and they're definitely not happy right now about this. It's their sport. It's their program. Why us? Why are we being discarded? Why, are we not being funded? And so the case was laid out today by Brad Smith and Gerald Harrison. I'm not taking sides, but at the same time, I'm not of the mindset that this was done lightly. And the health of the university seemed to be the major focus. The funding issue, the investment issue, the experience. The limited time I've known A.D. Harrison, he's really talked about that experience. I mean, going back to Christian Spears, he's talked about that student-athlete experience as well. And so the last two athletic directors have pushed that along. We care about the student-athletes. Gerald Harrison has a daughter that competes in basketball, I believe, if I recall that correctly. He has a background with women's sports, and so I don't think it's a bogus, and I don't think the Board of Governors were being disrespectful today, but we will talk about this tomorrow. Don't forget, you can find me on X at Paul Swann. You can also find me on Threads. I've got a link on my bio at my X handle. Kind of find your way there quickly. There are so many different variations of my name on these social medias. So find me on X at Paul Swann. The podcast is available now. It's on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcast. Do you agree that this was a bad decision by the Board of Governors? Do you disagree? Let me know in the comments on X and all those other various platforms. We'll talk to you tomorrow here on ESPN 94.1 and AM 930.
WRVC Huntington, W227BS Huntington, your flagship home of the Marshall Thundering Herd and The Drive with Paul Swann, ESPN 94.1 FM and AM 930.